We're live here on What Your Money Would Say. I'm your host, Andrew McNair.
And I'm your co-host, Scott Malik.
And we have our special guest today, Becky McCall with Santa Rosa Health and Rehab. And what we're going to be doing is we're talking about the state of healthcare, and in particular, we're talking about skilled nursing care. And so I want to always start off by talking about the state of healthcare. Let's just face it. These expenses are not getting any cheaper. I mean, if you're just looking at it for a loved one or maybe a spouse, I think you definitely need to understand that there's 3 stages of healthcare. The first one being home healthcare or home care. This is where you have a private caregiver, maybe a neighbor that you're paying to sit with your loved one. This is where you're maybe paying an agency to come in for a 3 or 4 hour minimum, and you're paying about $15 an hour. And what I always share with people is that's a great transition service, at least minimally. I mean, because it starts off the cheapest option. It might be only $500 a month. But we know, Scott, that it becomes one of the most expensive. I mean, we have families that pay $13,000 a month to stay in their home. So it does become a luxury over time. And then as we migrate, we have assisted living. Now, assisted living ranges from $2,000 to $5,000, with the average being $3,500 for one person. And again, that's a private pay service, so that's something that's going to come out of your pocket, not Obamacare, not TRICARE or Medicare. You're going to have to pay for that. And then lastly is skilled nursing. And so you have to understand, if you're, again, what I call a spring chicken, you're in your 50s and 60s, this is something you think might not apply to you. But it really does, and here's why. These expenses are getting more expensive over time. If you're looking at $3,500 as the average cost of assisted living today, in just 10 years, it's going to be $5,297 for one person, not including a second person fee of $1,000. And again, these expenses are getting more and more expensive. Scott, what was like the raise in inflation?
Well, I mean, most cost of living adjustments from Social Security are typically, anywhere from 3 to 4%, which still wouldn't keep up. But this year they got a 0.3%.
A big whopping 0.3%.
The reality is that, I had a lady that told me her Social Security went up $4 a month.
$4.
I mean,
yet assisted.
That's not going to keep up.
It's not, and you see all these assisted living facilities that are rising, and they're now 4.3% more expensive than they were the year before. We have to start planning. If not, it's going to start outpacing our income.
It's already outpacing. If you're not planning, you're going to be outpaced. I mean, that's just the situation.
And again, and I'm not trying to be I'm not a huge advocate for buying long-term care insurance for everyone. It's very expensive, but you definitely need a plan. The ostrich approach to long-term care isn't going to cut it. So go ahead, Becky, if you don't mind sharing with us about how skilled nursing facilities work, that would be fantastic.
Sure. A skilled nursing facility is a little bit different from ALF in that there's a doctor's order that's required for 24/7 nursing care. So that's hence the skilled nursing there. And that is for people who are coming out of elective surgery, hip surgery, knees, those kind of things. They're going to be there for rehab as well as long-term care. We do both types. In a skilled nursing facility, you'll find rehab as well as long-term care.
Okay.
Now that's unique to your facility, though, is that the rehab and skilled nursing, both the long-term care portion and the rehab portion, right? And not every facility provides both, correct?
Most facilities provide.
Do?
Most
Okay.
of them will provide both. I don't know. I think there's very few now that only would do. If you're only doing rehab, then you're just a rehab center.
Which the public a lot of times is not informed on that. They think that everyone, when you go to the quote unquote old folks home, that you'll go to a nursing home. But a lot of times, if I have a sports injury that I have to get fixed, and I need rehab on that knee, I'm going to go to a rehab facility, a really nice facility like Santa Rosa Health and Rehab, which again, they take care of everything, the meals and all the physical therapy I'm going to be taking is all taken care of right there.
Yeah, and you've got your internet, your TV there, your phone in your room. We're keeping up with what's demanded now by
Right.
40 and 50-year-olds rather than a 90-year-old.
It's like the cruise ship without all
Yes,
the water, right?
yes.
That's not too shabby. While you're fixing your your knee or fixing a hip, and that's important, because the last thing you want to do is have a very traumatic surgery on your body and then have all the emotional, mental of being trapped in a gloomy facility. But that's not the case. They're light, they're bright. I mean, I always encourage families to tour these facilities. And Becky, they can get a tour by calling you, correct?
Oh yeah, and they don't really have to call. They can come 24/7 because it's not always a bad thing to come in at a time. Or if you work, say you work nights and you're sleeping during the day and you need to come in late afternoon or early evening,
Right.
then you can come in anytime and we'll do a tour.
Do they have to schedule an appointment to do a tour?
No.
So I think that's a good thing to kind of illustrate, because if somebody comes in on an unscheduled tour, it's if they like what they see on an unscheduled tour,
Absolutely.
they're seeing people that are unprepared for a tour from visitors, not people that are if you only schedule appointments, people will prepare for
Exactly.
people to come visit
Oh,
and
yeah.
tour. So
Yeah,
it's
and you want to look for, when you come in, you want to look for happy faces on the people who are there at getting rehab or long-term care, as well as from the staff, because if you're unexpectedly coming in and you're seeing happy faces, it's a really good.
That's right, and it's just not the facility too; it's the people, right?
Exactly.
Oh, it's
But
the
I also think that it's extremely important that what she kind of mentioned there with the staff being happy. And,
Absolutely.
And I know I've been to her facility, and it seems like the staff is always very pleased and very happy, and and so when you have happy workers, they create an environment where people will feel safe, feel comforted, all those things that are extremely important, especially when you're trying to rehab or trying to get long-term care. And so those are, and we keep going back to the misconceptions that we talk about with Hollywood and what people think. They think about that, like Andrew kind of mentioned, the old folks home, and those are all misconceptions that have really been eliminated or may not have even ever existed, but they portray it that way to kind of for dramatic effect, which in reality it's a much more
placing me in a facility and throwing away the keys.
Right. Well, all of the skilled nursing facilities are regulated by the state and the federal government. So we have regulations that are going to keep you safe, and all of that. A happy face is icing on the cake.
Exactly.
And that's what is important to look for.
And that's public information, like different deficiencies of facilities, and people should definitely do the research.
You all get your own ratings, correct?
Yes, we do.
Can you tell me what the different levels of ratings are? Like what's a good rate, like the best rating you can get?
Well, you want to look for it's a star rating.
Okay.
So you've got a 5-star rating down to a 1-star rating. And although I will say, there's some picky things that they can find sometimes. And you may be a fine facility and a 5-star facility at one time, but it's done monthly. So next month you may be a 4-star.
Right.
But it's important to look for, you want somebody that's Medicare, as a matter of fact, now with the new bundling program they've got going on, they're looking at 3-star facilities or above if you're going to be paid through that bundling program.
And I think what makes y'all really unique is your location. There's a lot of families that we talk to there in Escambia County that have loved ones in Santa Rosa County that they don't want to have to travel all across town multiple times potentially in a day to go see mom as her hips rehabbing. So if you have someone that can come closer to you, that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, and as we talked about earlier too, the outpatient program, once you've done your, say, 2 to 3 weeks of rehab and you're good to go home, but you still are needing some rehab, you can come back to our facility for outpatient.
And I know there's a lot of questions surrounding the financial side, which is, what our expertise is. So we definitely want to, break it down because there's 2 types of, patients that y'all are taking care of. If you walk through someone having surgery, going through rehab, what's the financial impact for that person from start to finish?
Okay. Before you're even admitted to the facility, we're going to look at your finances. So we will not be surprising you with anything. We'll be talking to you about your Medicare benefits, which is the first if you have traditional Medicare, your first 20 days are covered as long as you're progressing in therapy. On day 21, then you would be having a copayment due, which is $161 a day. And that 161 adds up if you're going to be there up to 100 days, which Medicare covers. They're going to cover the 80%, but your 161 is going to go through the 100 days.
And then you have to look at, if your health insurance or a supplement would pick that up.
Right.
Is that correct?
And a lot of people do have supplements, and even Medicaid can be a supplement. If you live in the community and you've got Medicare and Medicaid, or if you have Medicare and, say, TRICARE, you're going to be covered usually for up to those 100 days as long as you're progressing with your therapy.
You kind of mentioned something that I kind of want to ask about. You kind of mentioned very briefly that it's covered for the first 21 days so long as you're progressing.
Yeah, what is progressing?
What's the determination of progressing?
Okay, it's the first 20 days. So on day 21 is where that copayment picks up. But yeah, if you are, say you've had a stroke and you're not elective surgery, you're not there for knees or hips or whatever, if you've had a stroke and you're able to function at a certain level prior to the stroke, we're trying to get you back to that functional level. And if you're not progressing, if you're not able to be weight bearing on your own, if you're not able to say your cognition is impaired due to your stroke and you're just not able to follow commands, then within days, or certainly within a week, they're going to know that you're not going to meet that level of functioning that you were at. And therefore, if you're not doing the things, say, commands that a therapist is telling you to do, and you can't do that because of your cognition or physical reasons, then you're going to be dropped from Medicare. They're not a guaranteed 20-day 100%.
Okay. Now let's switch gears and go to someone that maybe has been in assisted living, been at home, and then just the level of care has got too far.
Right.
So how has that transition happened? How does that financially impact someone? What does that look like?
Okay. That's going to be your private pay or long-term care, which we do take long-term care. Most facilities do take long-term care. But y'all might want to talk a little bit about, after this, about the fact that even long-term care does not pay 100%
Right.
of your stay, which a lot of people think, oh, I'm good, I've got Medicare, I've got a supplement, and then I've also got long-term care. They think they're totally covered. And often they're not. But for a long-term care person, that's going to be around $7,500 for just your board.
And that's pretty standard. That's $7,500 a month.
Pretty standard.
And that's pretty standard. So
Yeah.
Again, it's not cheap.
No, and then you've got medications,
Right.
and then you've got therapy if you're there for any kind of therapy as well.
So again, if let's say you have $300,000 or $400,000, you could see how $8,000 a month at least could eat through a lot of assets very rapidly. And so if you need to look at long-term care insurance and you don't know if that's an option, that's why we offer our second opinion, our free consultation, and you can give our office a call at SWAN-Capital at 850-380-9558. That's 850-380-9558. The other benefit that I was talking about this morning with a group is veterans benefits. A lot of people just think that, I served 2 years in the military, there's no way I could be eligible for VA benefits. And they find out that the VA will pay up to $2,120 a month tax-free to help offset skilled care, assisted living, and home health care. If you meet the eligibility requirements, which are only 90 days active service with at least 1 day during a wartime period. I'll repeat that again. That's 90 days active service with at least 1 day during the wartime period. And so that's why families should definitely call to make sure they know what benefits are available.
There's a couple other eligibility requirements he's kind of glossing over. But.
Yeah, glossing over, but financial, military, and health. And
Yes.
so when it comes to Medicaid, though, a lot of people get those two confused. Like, where's Medicare start? Where's Medicaid end? But Medicaid is basically the safety net, right?
Yes, yes. And what happens is, say you're there, well, you could come in from the community. You don't have to go in through rehab. You could just get a doctor's order that say someone has declined so much in ALF that they're not able to function there anymore at the ALF, what the
Assisted living
requirement is.
facility.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, assisted living. So if somebody needs more care than can be given there, or if you're at home and something's happened and your family can't care for you anymore, you can come in, and if you have Medicaid, if you already have Medicaid, which is going to be your easiest route, they cover 100% of your care. That's your medications, everything that you need for a long-term care stay.
So if I'm completely clueless to Medicaid, and let's say I make $4,000 a month, that's going to be our example today, Scott, and I have $300,000 of assets, and I'm going into a facility that costs $7,500 a month. And let's just assume we haven't done any planning, so this person's not prepared. So what does that look like financially for them, starting with income test?
Well, with the income, you're going to be over the income limit. The reality is that the income limit for receiving Medicaid is about $2,200 a month right now in the state of Florida. And I kind of mentioned this earlier, but it does differ from state to state. I mean, there's not a whole bunch of variance.
Because they're all federal.
But it is federally funded, but each state has its own requirements. So you can only earn up to I'm rounding, $2,200 a month. But there are things that you can do if your income is over that $2,200 limit. And I kind of mentioned earlier that the courts have already tried all of the cases regarding this situation. It's called a Miller Trust or a qualified income trust. And what that does is it diverts the excess income into a specific trust that trust is designed to zero out every month and pay the skilled nursing facility everything that's over the limit.
So it's a roundabout way to actually get Medicaid benefits even if you're above the income limit.
Exactly, and that's what it's designed to do is basically the way that the state views it is it's reduced your income to that variable limit.
And Scott, can I just print that off on a bar napkin and then submit that to the state?
I'm an attorney that does this, so I kind of have a biased opinion on it, but I would definitely seek out an attorney like myself that does these kinds of things.
Because you want to make sure it's done correctly.
No. You won't know how to do this if you don't do it. I'm just telling you right now, if you're not an attorney that does these types of trusts, you're not going to know how to do it. I know a lot of attorneys that don't practice in this that still don't know how to do it, and they're still attorneys.
Right.
And so you have to really know what you're doing, because if you don't, you're not going to qualify.
Right. So you don't want an attorney that's doing DUIs to do your Medicaid income
Well,
trust,
I mean,
most likely.
the way the state, I can't say that because the way the state sees us is we're all qualified to practice any kind of law, but I wouldn't recommend it because the reality is that I wouldn't ever help somebody defend a DUI because that's not what I do.
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't do that either in our facility. When somebody comes in and they say, "Oh, I've got an attorney," often we'll say, because it affects us. If they get turned down, we're not going to get paid.
Bad. Exactly.
So we'll say, "No, you need to go see an attorney who's familiar with us."
Exactly. So it's really important to know.
So if I am over income limit, I want to make sure I've done this planning or start planning in advance, I could call your office, correct?
Correct.
Scott?
In my office, you can call my office at 850-435-4661. Again, that's 850-435-4661.
Now, in that example where I have more than enough assets, so I'm going to be forced to spend those assets down to some sort of asset limit. Is that correct, Scott?
Correct. You in the example you gave, you said you had $300,000.
Right.
Now, as an attorney, I'm always going to tell you it depends.
Depends on what
if you're
kind of
married.
assets.
If you're married, it can change because your spouse can have up to roughly $120,000 in assets that are countable in their name.
Which doesn't sound like a lot.
It doesn't sound like a lot.
Someone I'm leaving
especially
behind.
if you're paying $8,000 a month to, they are expensive. And
so I'm allowed to have $2,000, and
Correct.
then she might be able to have $120,000, and then after, God forbid, I pass away, that's all she's got is the $120,000 left, huh?
Correct. And I did mention kind of briefly that it's countable assets, and
Right.
so there are things that the state will look at that are not countable. You're allowed to have one vehicle. You're allowed to have your primary residence or your homestead, whatever you want to call it. You're allowed to do prepaid funeral expenses, household goods, different types of annuities and life insurance policies will not be countable when determining eligibility for Medicaid.
So if you're listening and you have more than those assets and you want to make sure your spouse is protected, that's why it's so important to make sure you're either sheltering assets or have some alternative plan for your health care. Again, it pays for those
to
who
kind of
plan.
jump on that, the reason it's so important to plan is because Medicaid has, and we didn't really mention it in this go around, is that Medicare has a 5-year look back period. And so if you are trying to do this planning and you're not, like I said,